It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Brendan Kane, and we're going to be discussing his brand new book, Hook Point: How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. Brandon, it is truly an honor, sir. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Shaun. It's great to see you, and it's great to connect with all the listeners out there again.
Well, I was thinking about this morning, getting ready for the interview. It's been a year and a half since our last conversation, so let's briefly begin the same place we did last time, and that's by having you share a bit of the Brendan Kane origin story. For the viewers, the listeners meeting you for the first time in our talk today, what are a few things they need to know about you?
Yeah, so my background is really in digital technology and social media, and it's a little bit different than most people in the space because I'm so much an experiential learner. So I pretty much have touched every aspect of it over the years. So I started off in entertainment, managing digital divisions for 2 movie studios and overseeing the marketing strategy of films ranging from $15 to $100 million budgets, which afforded me to connect directly with actors, producers, and screenwriters on how to further syndicate their brand online. And then I made the jump from the corporate world into being an entrepreneur and building technology platforms and licensing them back to big media companies. So I partnered with the likes of MTV, Viacom, Comedy Central, Vice Magazine, Paramount, Yahoo, to name a few. And some people know me for working with Taylor Swift, and that really came from an introduction through MTV and that partnership, amongst other notable celebrities, that they were very gracious to make those introductions and gave me a unique experience of background of seeing really what it takes to build and foster an audience at scale. And then, decided after this cumulative experience of working with the biggest brands and celebrities and athletes and journalists on the planet is, well, what does it mean for people starting from scratch? What does it mean people starting from zero? Somebody that's not a professional athlete or on television or film. And that's where I decided to run an experiment on myself of building 1 million followers in 100 countries in 30 days, which was my first book, and just really teaching those principles and what I learned through that process. And then fast forward today, as you mentioned, my new book, Hook Point: How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World, is, I think, the culmination of what made me so successful over the past 15 years. Is I had to really dive in deep internally to really dissect what is it that I'm best at. Because I would always get people that ask me, well, how do you close MTV as a client? How do you close Taylor Swift? Or how do you generate 1 million followers in 30 days or generate billions of views online, or selling tens of thousands of books all around the world? And it really comes down to this concept of a hook point, of really standing out, differentiating yourself in this very noisy world to draw the people that you want to your message, to your product, to your book, or whatever you're really trying to achieve.
One thing I want to key in on from the subtitle is that 3-second time span. Maybe frame that a bit in terms of when we talked a year and a half ago about your last book. What's shifted and changed in terms of marketing, communication, and technology and attention span? What are we having to really keep in mind when we're creating for this space we find ourselves in presently?
Well, it's a great question. It's the world that we find ourselves in today is a world where there's over 60 billion messages sent out on digital platforms each day between social media, push notifications, text messages, emails. All of those things accumulate to a tremendous amount of noise. Forbes recently released an article that said the average person's exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 ads a day. So which means is the average person's ignoring 4,000 to 10,000 ads a day. So how has that shifted the landscape? Well, in the world that we live in today, you're not just competing against your direct competition. So if you're an author, you're not just competing against other authors. You're competing against every piece of content. Like you're competing against Netflix. You're competing against LeBron James, The Rock, Kevin Hart, all of these people. Because the world is so noisy, you're fighting for that attention. And that's where this concept of the 3 seconds come up, is we have so much content that's being pushed to us on a daily basis. Us as individual consumers of the content, we have to prioritize, because obviously we cannot consume all of it. It's just too overwhelming. So we're making decisions in these split seconds of, should I stop my scrolling? should I stop and read this email? Should I open this email? Should I stop and look at this TV spot? Or should I stop and read this billboard? Whatever it may be, these decisions are happening in split seconds now because we're inundated with so much noise, because we're inundated with so much content. So that's where I think the landscape has dramatically shifted now since we last talked. With COVID going on, it's increased that even more because more people are at home. They're publishing more content on social media. They're engaging because they're not in the office at all times.
Well, I know one of the things that I struggle with as a content creator, and many of the authors I work with do as well, is we want to create kind of uniform content, a one and done, something we can just disseminate to all the platforms we're pushing content out on. And while that's convenient for me, it's convenient for the creators I work with. Is that really the best, or are we really missing out on something if we're trying to create this homogeneous content that should work everywhere?
Well, there's two elements to the way that I approach content. Is first and foremost, what is that hook? What is that way that we're going to get somebody to just stop and win the first part of the conversation? Because without that, you're going to lose. You're not going to get that view. You're not going to get that click. You're not going to get that buy in the book. You've got to focus on, when designing your content, is the first part is what goes before the story, what goes before my message to generate that pattern interruption. Because again, you just envision somebody scrolling through their feed, they just seen Kevin Hart tell a joke. They just watched the Netflix trailer. They just watched an ESPN highlight clip, and then comes your book or your piece of content. So in designing that content, we always start is, what is that hook? Now, when we're creating hooks, we want to create as many as possible to test, which is the next part of it. Is I never want to see people creating content without first setting a hypothesis of, why do I believe that this hook is going to work or this piece of content is going to work? And thus, when you put it out, if it doesn't work, you're not in despair about it. You've set that up. It's like you set a hypothesis. The hypothesis didn't prove true. So what is the next hypothesis I can do? It's kind of like the next hook up. In sports, they call it the next man up. It's the same principle with content. So just to recap, is first and foremost, designing your content from the ground up, with starting with the hook to generate that pattern interruption. And then two, making sure that you have that testing infrastructure in place. And it can be very primitive. It doesn't need to be complex, just to measure the results and whether you're being effective with the content strategy that you're putting out.
Well, another thing I always think that's kind of interesting is thinking about, how much time are we spending listening and researching versus creating and pushing out content? So what's a good balance? How much time should we put in on the front end before we even start creating and designing the content?
We spend a tremendous amount of time listening, researching, do competitive analysis. Like, one of the things that we talk about a lot is this concept of pattern interruption. Because you are fighting against all this noise, you're not just competing against your direct competition, you're competing against everybody. You have to first identify what the pattern is. How are people currently communicating through their content? What is that pattern that people are using over and over again? And then by studying and learning that, it gives us a competitive edge to disrupt that pattern, to flip it on its head so that you can grab that attention. Because one of the biggest mistakes that people make, whether you're a content creator, an author, or a speaker, is you're positioning your content or your message in the same way as everybody else. That doesn't mean that you're not unique. And I'm not saying that you don't have tremendous value. It's just, you got to put yourself in the consumer's shoes. It's like, if I'm scrolling up, let's just take meditation, for example. Let's say I'm doing a book about meditation. Now, meditation's been around for thousands of years. You type in meditation into Google and you get billions of results. Literally, you'll get billions of results. Now, what most people will say is meditation is the key to success, or meditation is the key to contentment or happiness, or whatever the things that you've heard. So now that I understand what the pattern is of how people are speaking about meditation, now I can look at, how do I disrupt that pattern? How do I flip it on its head to stand out? So one of the tools that we use sometimes, I'm not saying we use it all the time, but it's a perfect example of that pattern interruption, is subverting expectations, flipping it completely on its head. So if I was creating an ad for this meditation book, or even maybe thinking about a title for a book, maybe it says meditation is a scam, because that's completely reverse of what you've heard, to get people to stop. And then I'm not talking about clickbait here. Then I would dive into the story that matches that. And the story may look something like this: is, have you ever felt like meditation is just a scam? Has it just not really worked for you? Well, if you're that person, I feel your pain. Because when I first started meditation, I didn't really believe in it, because all the information that I was given didn't work for me. I was told I needed to sit down and clear my head. And every time I sat down, my mind would just race with all these thoughts. And I thought I was the failure. I thought the guru was just steering me wrong. So today I want to share with you something that I learned about being a non-meditator, somebody that thought meditation was a scam, to make it work for me. So will you click the link below and check out my book? So with that, I took something that's been talked around billions of times, disrupted that pattern, and that the way that I disrupted the pattern could attract both people that have found meditation that hasn't worked for them, and also people that are meditators. Both in both of those instances, it will get them to stop, so that I can win the next part of the conversation.
And I like that you brought us into a scenario that has an element of storytelling. I think one of the places that I want to combine these two things, and I see a lot of my authors doing this, is where I want to tell the story to build the brand, but I also want to do a call to action for a product, or get somebody to buy a course or a book at the same time. Those are actually two different customer journeys. Why should we be conscious of trying to often keep those separate?
Well, it's a great point, and it really comes down to, what part of the conversation are you in with the consumer? Is this the first time that they've heard about you, or have they heard about you before? And I like to think about it is almost earning the right to sell. So I'll give you an example. There, in my first book, one of my friends is the chief strategy officer of an agency called Shareability that creates viral content for the biggest brands in the world. So they did a campaign for Cricket Wireless with a wrestler named John Cena. And the first two videos were John Cena reacts, where he surprises fans as they're kind of like recording why they love John Cena, and he pops out of the background and breaks through the wall and surprises them. Generated hundreds of millions of views. Outside of like small Cricket Wireless logos, there's no sale going on. They're providing value, they're providing entertainment. And then what they did is they retargeted the people that watched and engaged with that video with a more direct response call to action, like, hey, this is John Cena. Thanks so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Why don't you go check out Cricket Wireless, and check out their offerings. So it's earning the right to do that, to earning the right to have that conversation, versus most people go straight to the sale. When somebody doesn't know you, it may be coming off-putting. It's like the old adage, people hate to be sold to, but they love to buy things. It's like, if you go straight for the sale and people see it, unless you've got the most remarkable product in the world, most of the time that's going to fall flat. Now, the other part of it is, you can tell a compelling story, like what I did with meditation. Is I opened up with a pattern interrupt. I told the story about my personal experience and understanding their challenge, the pain that they're feeling, and then offering, well, why don't you join me on this journey and let me help you? So in my Hook Point book, I interview a friend of mine that's sold over $1 billion worth of product online by serving it to cold audiences. And one of the things that he says that's so true is that the moment that you can articulate somebody's problem, somebody's pain point better than they can describe it to themselves, you win that trust. You win that person over, because they feel like you really understand them at a very deep level. And the minute they feel heard, the minute they feel like you understand what they're experiencing and going through, they're going to be more receptive to and open to what it is that you want to share with them. Even if that is to buy a book or to sign up for a course.
In my space right now, the place I see so many of my authors investing time is video content, primarily on Instagram and YouTube, some on Facebook with live streaming. But in terms of the traction, a lot of them are seeing, I'm seeing it more on Instagram and YouTube right now. What would you say are some of the best practices in terms of headlines, thumbnails, captions? I see people doing things that are fantastic and people who are just missing it all the way along the journey. So in terms of what's working well in video right now, how can we be more effective?
And this is where the 3 second concept really comes into play. So I'll break down YouTube and Instagram separately because they're similar in how they operate, but a little bit different. So let's start with YouTube. The headline and thumbnail is one of the most critical factors. Yes, YouTube's a search engine, but majority of the traffic's coming from suggested video. And what suggested video is when you're watching another video, you'll see on desktop, they'll have other videos to recommend, or on mobile, it'll be like under that. So that's really the end user of YouTube. They're making that split second decision. Do I want to consume this video based upon the thumbnail and headline? So that's where designing it from the hook perspective of not trying to do too much. This is a big thing, is like people will try and through a headline or thumbnail, either just convey way too much information in that or too little information. There's a sweet spot in between where you want to really spark their interest, not give too much away, but be like, I want to see what this person has to say. And most people are failing with that with their thumbnail and headline. What they're doing is they're designing the video or they're designing the thumbnail and headline based upon how they perceive the video based on them creating it. Now, that people often run into problems because you know your information better than anybody else. So just think about the person that's on YouTube not searching for you, is what is going to draw them into that conversation, and design the headline and thumbnail to that. And going back to what we were talking about earlier is study other thumbnails and headlines of other content creators. Look at a content creator that has tremendous success. Look at his big wins, but also look at the ones that underperform and dissect. Then look at channels that just completely underperform. And for yourself as a content creator, match up your headline and thumbnail against other content creators that spark that virality, and see if mine was in the suggested video tab next to one of the top content creators, how would it stack up? Would I get the click over them, or would they win the click over me? So that's one way of looking at it from a YouTube perspective. Instagram, very similar topic, or very similar information of how it works, in that, again, it comes down to that first 3 seconds, although we're not talking about a thumbnail and headline to create a click. It's happening in the scroll. And what we need to do is we need to get that person to stop scrolling to win that. And what the way that the algorithms work for Instagram is they're looking at the view to reach ratio, because a view is counted at 3 seconds, not 1 second, because advertisers were up in arms of getting charged at the 1 second mark. So what they did is they changed, okay, we're not going to count a view until 3 seconds. So one of the key factors that algorithms look at is, what is the view to reach ratio? Meaning, for the number of people that I push it to, what is the percentage that actually stop and make it past 3 seconds? And we see that the bare minimum, it's got to be 30%. To have a real shot of going viral, it's got to be over 40 or 50%. So again, when we're designing a piece of video for Instagram, people use meme cards, those burned in headlines, as a way to express what the video is. Now, it's not enough in today's world to just do a meme card, because everybody does them now. So you've got to really use that meme card or that headline to create that pattern interruption and get people to stop. And we talked through like subverting expectations as an example. And I'll give you another example of a video that did really well for us that we created, where the meme card said, "Warning," in all capital letters with exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Safety is dangerous. So we flipped it on its head. It's like, normally people are always talking about be safe, but we started off with flipping that script to create that pattern interruption. And we started off with a video of a skateboarder trying this crazy stunt multiple times and getting falling, but then eventually getting it to express what was being said in that meme card. And then we dove into the content that we really wanted to teach them. So your job as the content creator first and foremost, is just to win that part of the conversation. And in winning that first part of the conversation, don't overthink it. Don't over engineer the amount of information you're expressing. Focus on simplifying it. And what is that pattern interruption?
Brendan, I've been enjoying watching some of your marketing campaigns for the new book. In terms of this release, how did you actually apply some of the hook point strategies for your own book launch?
Yeah, so there's several things that we do. One, we have a very big testing infrastructure in place that we set up for the first book and played into the second book. And what we're doing several different things. We'll test different imagery with different CTAs. We'll test different context around it of expressing our book in different ways. And this is one of the reasons that we're so successful is we use a communication framework that was the head of my communication department in my agency taught NASA these principles, the same principles that Pixar uses in their movies to get many different audiences to show up. Audi uses it, Bill Clinton uses it. And essentially, what we look at and have an understanding of is people perceive the world in different ways. So there's people that perceive the world through thoughts and logic. So for them, it's like the data, the facts doesn't make sense to me. Then one of the biggest populations in North America is about feelings and emotions. How does this make me feel? Then there's other people that it's like, is this fun? Is it going to be exciting to read this book? Is it going to be awesome? Then there's other people that it's just like, do I believe in this person? Do I trust this person? What are the opinions this person is sharing with me? So when we're working with clients to develop hooks, or even with our books or our clients' hooks, we're constructing those ads to hit all of those. So I may construct an ad for my book Hook Point and say, Hook Point, how to stand out in a 3-second world. There's over 60 billion messages sent out on digital platforms each day. You need a hook to stand out. And when you have a hook that works, you're going to feel so amazing because you're going to feel like you're heard. You're going to be connecting people at a very deep level. And it is going to be so fun. It's going to be so exciting and awesome because you're going to see this massive growth in your business. And I fundamentally believe that this is the first place that you should start when marketing your book or marketing your product or service. So what did I just do there? I just took the same book and just expressed it in different ways. I spoke to the logic and the data and the facts through the 60 billion messages, and that you have to have a way to stand out. I spoke to the feelings and emotions of how good it's going to feel when you have a hook that's working and connecting with people all over the world. And also talking about how fun and exciting and awesome it's going to be to dive into this book. And then I shared my opinions about why this is an important book for starting off your marketing campaign.
Well, Brendan, we're almost at time. Anything I haven't asked you that you want to make sure we still fit into the conversation?
I would just say really the biggest piece of advice I can give to people out there is really understand that we live in this micro attention world. You've got to win that first 3 seconds to win the next part of the conversation. In addition to what I just finished off with is understand when you're designing content, typically you're designing content based on how you perceive the world. But understand that the person on the other side of the screen, the other side of the stage, if you're speaking on stage, may perceive the world differently. So make sure that you're creating a well-rounded message, a well-rounded story to really maintain the attention that you capture.
And Brendan, for the listeners, the viewers who'd like to connect with you, find out more, where can we find you on the web?
Yeah, so if they're interested in checking out the book, I would go to book.hookpoint.com. They can also direct message me on Instagram at Brendan Kane, or email me directly at bkane, Kane, at brendanjkane.com. And Brendan is spelled Brendan.
And like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Brendan and pick up your very own copy of his new book. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Brendan Kane. Once again, our book today was Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. For more on Brendan and the book, a great place to start is the book's website. You can find that over at book.hookpoint.com. And Brendan, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure connecting with you and all the people listening.